Money is the most important technology in the world.
Regulations to make things safer end up having negative effects. They crowd out innovation and they actually don't protect people.
If they're treading on your rights, I suggest that you definitely stand up, no matter what.
Welcome to the first of two very special episodes of the Aussie Wire News. Around me, you'll be able to see and hear the final preparations going on in the main atrium for the Students for Liberty annual conference that takes place in Washington, D.C. Over 1,000 students, plus a heap of other delegates and speakers and VIPs, are going to be descending on this room behind me in just over an hour's time. We're going to bring you all the coverage from inside the conference. I'm going to be interviewing speakers, interviewing organisers, and more importantly, interviewing some of the students that have flown from up to 50 different countries around the world in order to be here and be a part of sharing these ideas of liberty with each other. Here at the Aussie Wire, we're proud to give you front row seats, so please enjoy the Aussie Wire News. Well, here we are at the Students for Liberty conference in DC. It is the opening night. Robert Breedlove, you were one of our speakers on a panel just now, focusing, specialising, looking extensively and exclusively at Bitcoin. Why do you think it is that a Liberty conference opens with Bitcoin?
Well, quite simply, money is the most important technology in the world. And our current implementation of money is tyrannical, basically. It's very anti-liberty. And Bitcoin is the antithesis of that. So Bitcoin is freedom money. You're right. A few years ago, this would have seemed strange, but today I can't think of any better topic than to open with. Technically, it was on CBDCs, so they were trying to look at the dark side. But anytime you talk about the dark side, you inevitably end up talking about the light.
Well, this is something I want to dive into because it's confusing for lay people out there to say Bitcoin good, CBDC bad. What's the difference? What makes one of them the light and the other one the darkness?
You could frame it in terms of centralization versus decentralization. Now, CBDC would be the ultimate centralized money, right? There's one group of people that can fully survey, control, print, manipulate, freeze, reverse, socially engineer all users of a money, right? You can think about it as a one-node database. And whoever runs that node runs everyone else that's forced to use the money. Again, Bitcoin is the exact opposite. Every individual is a node on a database. So the individuals choose for themselves what rules serve their individual self-interest. And the collective outcome of that is the social consensus called Bitcoin. So it's a matter of, and you could also frame this as like communism versus capitalism, or central planning versus capitalism. Central planning we know is bad, right? You have one group deciding prices, output quotas, etc. It creates dislocations in the market, shortages and overages, people starving, to unused product, unsold inventory, like Soviet Russia, right? In a nutshell. We know central planning is bad. Capitalism is the opposite of central planning. It's decentralized planning. It's every individual making decisions based on the information particular to their time and place. So decentralized planning good, centralized planning bad. Bitcoin is decentralized money. CBDC is centralized money.
So the difference in the central bank digital currency, Bitcoin is digital currency. The difference is the central bank side.
That's right. It's a centralization. So, and it's a matter of like, in decentralization, each individual governs themselves. They own themselves. They're not beholden to any other authority. They author themselves. In a centralized model, you have an authority that authors your destiny, right? That tells you what to do. And if you don't do what you're told, then you get hurt. So it's like freedom versus tyranny.
Now, throughout the life of Bitcoin, which is now pushing out towards 15 years, if I'm not mistaken, we've had a continuous stream of predictions. On one side, it's going to collapse and turn into nothing. And on the other side, people saying it's going to the moon. We've seen both of those. Neither of those have proven to be correct. There is, however, a reality that there's a finite number of Bitcoins in the world. And there are, it seems increasingly to me, but that might be just the bubble that I'm in, more and more people saying that's a problem. This can only last for so long. Once that last Bitcoin is issued, that's it for Bitcoin. You've got a response to that. What is it? How do you? You're a Bitcoiner, not a shitcoiner, if I can put it that way. You're a Bitcoin purist. Why do you see such a big future in Bitcoin, and other people see it?
Correct, yeah. So I would first like to push back on the first point.
Okay.
Bitcoin is the fastest growing asset in human history in 15 years. So if it's moon or zero, like you got to pick a side, I'd say, well,
It's not
the
zero, that's
fastest
for
growing
sure.
asset in human history.
Okay,
So
yeah.
the moon boys are winning so far.
Okay.
Why do people think it's going off a cliff? First of all, so the way Bitcoin works is that it's issued on a fixed and diminishing supply curve. So it's the only asset, one, that has a perfectly fixed supply in the world, and that we know the exact supply at any point in time. You
Right.
can't say that, you can't globally audit the supply of anything,
Yeah.
ever.
Gold. How
Nothing.
much is still in the
You
ground
have
that we
no
haven't
idea.
found yet?
It's all
No idea.
estimates.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's the opposite, right? It's like you can actually verify. You can run the software. You don't have to trust anyone. You verify for yourself how many Bitcoin have been issued, how many can possibly be in circulation. So that curve, the issuance rate reduces by 50% every 4 years on what's called the halving. The next
Okay.
event is in May 2024, this year.
Okay.
And then the next one's in 2028, 32, et cetera. That's, you can think about that as like quantitative tightening, where there's less and less Bitcoin being produced, as opposed to the quantitative easing that
Sure.
central banks engage in. That curve terminates at zero in the year 2140. So
Okay.
no more Bitcoin is issued after the year 2140. It hits its cap of 21 million. You subtract lost coins.
And there are a few now.
And they estimate, again, we don't know, but 3 to 4 million lost coins.
Yeah.
So there are detractors who would say that when Bitcoin is no longer has this block subsidy to incentivize miners to mine, that Bitcoin will fail. Well, you could study the first 15 years of Bitcoin's history, and I would say it strongly evinces otherwise. Because
Okay.
what Bitcoin does is it switches from a block subsidy model for funding miners and incentivizing miners to mine and secure the network
Yeah.
to a transaction fee model.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we've seen happen, is that as block subsidy has declined, transaction fees have increased,
Right.
and those miners are still being incentivized.
So in a way, it's almost a soft switch. It's viewed as a
Exactly.
cliff, but there is actually
It's a
something of a soft switch.
Every 4 years, 50% reduction,
Yeah.
all the way out until the year 2140. So the
Yeah.
people that are saying this thing's going off a cliff,
Yeah.
you're
So,
speculating about something in the year 2040.
115 years away. Okay. So what's the issue then with other types of cryptocurrency? There's a bazillion coins out there, from Dogecoin to
Yeah.
much more serious efforts to try and do something
Yeah.
that's practicable. Why is someone like you so passionate and excited about Bitcoin and not about these other, what many would say are alternative cryptocurrencies?
Again, it's the dichotomy of centralization versus decentralization.
Okay.
Another way to frame this, though, the internet emerged as a set of successive protocols. So we have like HTTP, TCP/IP, SMTP.
Yeah.
Those protocols were competing in the free market before basically the world ossifies onto one. We standardize onto one protocol, and that thing becomes the standard.
Yeah.
Right? Network effects take hold. Everyone uses HTTP. Everyone uses TCP/IP today. So there's a competitive market process by which these protocols ossify and become a global standard.
Sure.
And it becomes a global standard because there's an economy of scale to be gained by everyone speaking the same language, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Bitcoin is like the internet of money, right? It's just another open source protocol, but instead of permissionlessly moving information, we're permissionlessly moving economic value.
Okay.
So you can think of it as like the latest layer in the internet. We it is definitively the most decentralized, right? It's been attacked more than any other network.
cannot
It's
argue
the
with that.
biggest,
Yep.
most valuable network. We tried to fork it to have larger blocks in 2017. There have been attacks, to fork it and increase the supply cap and change this and change that, blah, 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 blah. It's the most decentralized one. So the Bitcoiner argument would be it has standardized to become the internet protocol for money.
Yeah.
Every other shitcoin, which I mean all of them,
Yeah.
Ethereum on all the
Yeah.
way down,
Yeah.
are copy-paste of that, and then they're using the Bitcoin protocol to either try to compete with Bitcoin directly, which I think is a fool's errand for the reasons we just laid out, or they're trying to use it to address another market niche.
Right.
And maybe they'll be successful in other market niches, who knows? But there's no market larger than the market for money. We're talking about $100 trillion plus market.
Yeah.
If you combine the use case for every other of the 30,000 shitcoins, you might get $10 or trillion in total addressable market, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the possibility that it's going to succeed and capture all that is obviously low. So for me, it's just like, why be distracted by any of that noise when you can focus on the provably decentralized internet of money that only needs to keep doing a block every 10 minutes and adhering to a supply cap of 21 million.
Yeah.
And then presumably would continue to be the fastest growing asset in human history and outcompete all other forms of money. Well, I mean, how much upside do you need, right? There's still 200x upside left in Bitcoin, and it doesn't need any technological improvement, really.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to scale Lightning Network and some of these layer 2s to make it more transactable, but Bitcoin Core doesn't need to do anything new.
So that was where I wanted to go. I'm mindful of your time. You've
Yeah.
been very generous with us, and you've been very busy with the conference, and you haven't had dinner yet. So just trust me, Robert has
Mainly the dinner.
Robert has looked after us today. But I did want to get to this, the usability criticism. This
Yeah.
idea of it's every 10 minutes. I want to tap my card now, and the payment's got to go. I can't hang around in a coffee shop for 10 minutes. There's a lot of people hung up on perhaps older, earlier iterations,
Yeah.
and may not be aware of some of these innovations that are helping to solve those problems. So
Yeah.
can you bring us up to speed? Where is Bitcoin at now?
Yeah. So I use Lightning Network to transact with people, pay people that work for me all the time. It works perfectly fine. It's, they send you an invoice, or you scan an invoice and you
Yeah.
type in the amount,
Yeah.
or the amount actually will populate if they send an invoice, and you hit send, and it's done. It's
Yeah.
instant, final settlement, no intermediaries, works perfectly. That's one scaling solution. That's a layer
Right.
2 protocol called Lightning. There's other things like side chains and Liquid and all these other experiments going on that offer similar features with different trade-offs. And
Okay.
just like early days of the internet, like I said, when people are experimenting to determine which protocol wins,
Yeah.
well, that protocol experimentation is happening now on top of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin's sort of one Internet of Money protocol. Now there's experimentation taking place, layer 2, layer 3. So anyone that's saying Bitcoin's not transactable, not usable, it's like you haven't done the homework clearly, because it works. It's in my pocket. It works all the time. If you had a Lightning wallet, I'd show you right now.
Yeah.
So,
I don't.
there you go.
I've
So
got some catching up to do myself.
It's early days,
Yeah.
right? So it's still, and it takes, Bitcoin's a really big idea, and people get very accustomed to using technologies, and I think it just takes time, right? Like 25 years ago, CEOs are being told they needed a website.
Yeah.
Fortune 1000 CEOs are like, why do I need a website? Why do I need the internet? I've got the intranet. I don't need that. I'll build my own internet. And then fast forward 25 years, there are no intranets.
Yeah.
It's all internet. The open network always outcompetes the closed network. So I just think it's a matter of time.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Really
Topher.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're continuing our coverage from Students for Liberty with none other than Nick Gillespie, editor-at-large at Reason Magazine. Nick, thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes out of what is a very busy night for you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, Nick, you're very, very well known for your work, but perhaps less so in Australia than you would be over here. In a nutshell, how would you describe what you do?
I write articles and create videos and podcasts for Reason Magazine, the world's largest libertarian publication. We've been around since 1968, and our slogan is free minds and free markets. So we look to see how can you increase freedom in every area of human activity. We're happy warriors against busybodies and control freaks. We're into technology and new mindsets and kind of new ways of living that make life more interesting and more fun and more responsive to whatever you want.
So what got you into that? What was it that alerted you as the young man that you no doubt
That
were at
I
one
once
point in time?
was, very long ago.
Look, I'm not implying that.
Ironically, it was Reason Magazine.
Okay.
So Reason's been around since 1968. I'm 60. I've been working at Reason for 30 years, half of my life. I started reading it probably when I was 15 or 16. My older brother went to college and found it in the college bookstore.
Right.
Started sending it home to me. And what I liked about it then, and what I still like about it, is that it would look at policy issues and kind of cultural issues, strip away moral panic, strip away bullshit, and kind of focus in on like, is this law, is this policy doing what it says it's going to do? And a lot of the times it doesn't. So things like regulations to make things safer end up having negative effects. They crowd out innovation and they actually don't protect people. So I started reading it and it really spoke to me. I worked as a journalist after graduating college. I went and got a PhD in English literature, and as I was finishing that up, Reason had a job opening and I applied for it and got the job, and then I've been there ever since.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Something like that.
When you come to a place like this, there's 1,000 young Nick Gillespies out there who are going to be in that room.
I'm not taking responsibility for that, nor I think they're better than that. But
Well, this is the thing. We all have the privilege of standing on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Absolutely.
What do you hope to see the 20-year-olds in there be able to accomplish in their lifetime? It's been a struggle for you. It's a struggle for me, where it's a slow build. What do you see in the future?
Well, one of the things that I think a lot about in the broad-based libertarian movement is to remember both the fact of progress, but also the need for progress. My parents, who have long passed, were born in the 20s. They were the children of immigrants in America. They grew up during the Depression. My father fought in World War II. By the time they died, their lives were infinitely better than what their parents had ever imagined, what they had ever imagined.
Sure.
My life is so much better than theirs. My kids, I have 2 sons, their lives will be better than mine.
Sure.
But the future doesn't just happen. And one of the ways that we make sure that the future keeps getting better is by remembering the past, to remember what worked and what didn't. There's a lot of wisdom that has gotten forgotten. We should recover that. But also, there's a lot of progress. And when I hear younger people and a lot of older people now saying, that the current economy in America is awful, that nobody can afford a job, nobody can afford a house, nobody can afford a car, a college education, it's just wrong. And it's spectacularly wrong. But so we need to remember that actually things are getting better. But then we also have to think about why they are getting better and how you make them better still.
Yeah.
And what I hope that younger people recognize is that what is good about libertarianism is it doesn't dictate a particular future. It doesn't say, in order for America to become great, this many people must die in this cause, or we need to all believe that, the only thing that matters is global warming, and, all of our money is going to be spent trying to mitigate that. It is that the ultimate future is one in where you get to pursue your vision. I get to pursue mine as much as possible. I'm not an anarchist. There are times where government has to come in, but it's that, and kind of figuring out what are the technologies that we need to get to a better place. What are the institutions, that many of the institutions that we're living in now, I think this is true in Australia as well as the US, they are 50 years old, 100 years old. They were developed for a different world, and they just don't work anymore, if they ever did, but definitely not now. And we're at a real juncture point where all of the stuff coming out of World War II, and this is things like the UN and NATO and the World Bank and the IMF, like so many international organizations, have outlived whatever purpose they once served. We need to rebuild what comes next along a line where it's, it helps individuals more than groups.
Yeah. So last question before I let you go. I know you're in
Thank
demand. What specific message, you've got the chance to stand on this stage and impart a specific message at this specific time to the people gathered here. What are you going to be telling?
What I'm going to be telling them is that it is, freedom is not something that is given to people, and it's not something that occurs naturally. You don't discover freedom like you discover the Ayers Rock or, the Grand Canyon. You have to invent it and reinvent it again and again. And what that means is that, people today, we have so much wealth, we have so much education, we have so much technology to make beautiful, wonderful worlds. And we need to fight against the people who are saying, no, you can't have free speech anymore. No, you can't have free movement. You can't have a free economy. We have to push that back, and then we have to run as many as experiments in living, as John Stuart Mill would call them, and keep seeing what works and what doesn't, and keep pushing. But we need to, the freedom comes from a fight, not from waiting for it to happen.
Yeah. Well, Nick Gillespie, thank you so much for your time. Go well today, and I know you will. Well, welcome back to our continuing coverage of the Students for Liberty conference. One of the things I love about conferences is that you meet fascinating people that you've only ever heard about before and never actually met. But in actual fact, because I'm guessing you're watching from Australia, you might never have heard of Jaden or of Eden, Jaden's mum. So guys, I'm going to get you to start by kind of giving us a rundown of the story, because a lot of people in Australia would not have seen or heard anything about what's happened.
I was just starting 7th grade. It was August. And I was wearing a Gadsden flag patch. If you don't know what that is, basically it's a snake with a yellow background and the letters "Don't Tread on Me." So when the Americans were fighting the British for independence back in 1776, Christopher Gadsden created that flag, and the Army and the Navy and other branches fly that flag today.
Yeah.
And it symbolizes freedom and not wanting people to tread on your rights.
Yeah.
But the school said it was racist and related to slave trade, which is definitely not, I'll tell you that much. They threatened us with suspension if we didn't take it off, and I definitely didn't want to take it off. So we resisted, and we reached out to my favorite author of the Tuttle Twins, Connor Boyack.
Big
And
shout out to Connor Boyack and the Tuttle Twins.
he's a
My
G.
kids are huge fans as well. And my son, who's 6, is going to get a huge kick out of watching this interview and seeing you mention Connor. So
Tell him I
thank
say
you.
hi. He posted the video when my mom recorded the whole meeting of how they said it was racist, and it got 12 million views on X, which is pretty significant.
55 now.
55?
Connor said.
Wow, 55 million views. 12 million originally. That's when I last checked up.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. But the story's crazy. There's a reason why people responded, was because it wasn't just about the patch in the end. You were being threatened with expulsion, and ultimately, as I understand it from chatting with you earlier, Eden, they ultimately were going after every single patch that had any sort of significance or meaning for as far as you guys were concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They wouldn't even let him go back to get his school books out of his locker because they didn't want any child to be traumatized by looking at the Gadsden flag, which is insane because walking into the school, they had like a Betsy Ross flag. And I was like, interesting. They sent me an email saying their reasoning behind saying that the flag was racist. And it was a bunch of weak articles linking it to January 6th stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, if you're going to say that this flag is racist, then you better include the American flag because the founding fathers were racist. Well, they weren't racist, but
Yeah.
they had slaves. And if
Yeah.
you're linking the Gadsden flag to because, oh, he had slaves, then the founding fathers had slaves too. And you can't, and the American flag was at the January 6th things too. So if I come back to school and the American flag's there, then we're going to have a problem.
Well, so you say that, but actually in Australia, the flying of the Australian flag is now being essentially banished out of public life. Even the Australian flag. So we had Australia Day just the other day, January 26th, just a week or so ago. And you could barely see any Australian flags anywhere. People were afraid to show the Australian flag. And this will sound familiar to you. If you drive around with an Australian flag out the window of your car, if you have one in your front yard, people accuse you of being racist. Somehow our national flags have become symbols of racism, and that's exactly what's happened in your case.
Yeah.
I'd fly like 20 of those flags if I could.
Yeah. So what's the experience like for you then? Were you very much alone, or were there other students that kind of rallied around you?
No, because the school system in America teaches you to be a doer, not a thinker. They don't want you thinking about stuff. They want you to obey the government. And they were like, just take it off, man. Why don't you just follow the rules?
Yeah,
Like, you need to respect the authority. Like, no, I'm not doing that, man.
A student told him F the First Amendment because Jaden, said, "Oh well, it's my free speech," and
Yeah.
the kid said, "F the First Amendment and F your free speech."
Yeah, wow. You know what this reminds me of? And you're probably very familiar with the story. You're familiar with Claudette Colvin.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously pre-Rosa Parks, she was the very first person that I'm aware of, as far as my research has uncovered, that ever refused to go to the back of the bus because of the colour of her skin. And as a result of her, actually, Rosa Parks credits Claudette Colvin as having inspired her to then do the same thing in Montgomery County 9 months later. And that's the one that we read about and we've heard about. But actually, 9 months before her was Claudette Colvin. Now, in Claudette's case, she wasn't the only young African-American girl on that bus. And the others all got up and moved. Right? And she just sat there and said, well no, I'm not going to do that. And it's very, very similar to what you're talking about. I've heard some people being critical, though, and saying, you were probably pressured into it by your mum or your family or this sort of thing. So tell me, why did you even put that patch on in the first place? What did that mean to you? And not just as a flag, you've mentioned that already, but for you to wear that flag in public. What was that about?
It's symbolizing free speech and how we all have our rights. And if you're going to tread on my rights, the snake's going to bite you. Don't step on the snake.
So in this case, you're the snake.
Yeah.
The school's doing the treading,
Yeah.
and you're the snake. Now, what's really interesting for me, and this doesn't happen yet in Australia, we need to get to the point where it does, because I think it's a really good thing, is that people like Connor picked up the story, and then as a result of Connor Boyack talking about it with you, you're now here at the Students for Liberty conference. You were speaking a minute ago, and sort of the whole of America has now heard this story. What's some of the fallout now? Is the school changed their tune? Can you even walk back in there yet? Like, where are things up to now?
So now I can wear it without any problems. I can also wear my other patches, which they would have
The
definitely
FPC
had.
patch is what started all of this. They wanted him to pull his Firearms Policy Coalition patch.
Yeah.
And that's when I came in and I was like, look, the ACLU says that you can wear a feminist, pinkier pussycat hat and you can wear an NRA hat. And if you allow one, you have to allow the other.
Yeah.
Or you can just flat out ban hats. So if you want to just ban patches, that's fine. We'll accept that. But while other kids are wearing rainbow flags, which we, that's their freedom of speech and they should be allowed to do that. You also have to allow him to wear his Gadsden flag. They're both flags. There's no, it's not going to disrupt anything. He's been wearing this backpack forever and it's never had an issue. And regarding the Firearms Policy Coalition, well, they reenacted the Civil War at the school. They had a reenactment, which I thought was great. They had toy guns. So an image of a gun is not going to scare these kids when they reenacted this stuff before.
Yeah.
It's silly. So
it seems incredibly selective. Look, last sort of question. There's a lot of people that say, oh, you shouldn't cause trouble. You should just let these things slide. Don't cause trouble. Don't make a fuss. I've been saying for a very long time, there's no such thing as a small issue. That actually, if it's big enough for them to want to push back on you, then we should be willing to sort of push back on that and to push through with that issue. You've gone through a lot in the time since all of this blew up. Would you do it again?
Definitely. I do it 20 times over.
What would you say to other kids who are being put under pressure, whether it's by peer groups, by schools, maybe in some cases by their own families or other things, where they're being told, you know what, just sit down, just do as you're told, just don't make a fuss, just comply and go along with everybody else?
If they're treading on your rights, I suggest that you definitely stand up, no matter what your peers think, no matter what the school thinks, and do not comply.
It's I can see where you get it from. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you both, and thank you so much for speaking with us here on the Aussie Wire.
Bye.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's coverage of the Students for Liberty conference in Washington, D.C. Beautiful, sunshining, crisp winter day. Absolutely lovely here in Washington, D.C. Now, we've got more interviews from inside the conference coming up. We're speaking to students. We're speaking to some of the lecturers and some of the teachers that have come. We're speaking to some of the institutions that have come. And we might even have a couple of fun interviews that happened after the dinner when perhaps, yes, well, you'll have to wait and see. If you want to catch up with past episodes of the Aussie Wire News, you can do that at theaussiewire.com. You can follow all of our socials via @theaussiewire across all the platforms. And please consider becoming an insider. That's a financial supporter of the Aussie Wire. Our insiders help to make it possible for us to do what we do, and you'll find the link for that in the description of this video. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.